All right, welcome back. We're here getting ready to start masking up the panel for our first project. Brought out a few things that we're going to need, and I'll go through that. What we're going to do is just start masking it out here, and then we'll end up taking it to school and start doing the designs, and I'll show you all that too. So first step is to get this thing masked up into all our little quadrants with a center diamond, and let's get started on that. So I brought out a few things that we're going to need. Something to mark with, so a pencil, just regular pencil is fine. This is a China marker or a grease pencil, which is fine. Basically what we're looking for is something that we can mark on the panel that we can easily take off with water or a paper towel that's not going to stain this. So don't use a Sharpie or anything like that. So typically a pencil leaves a light mark, but enough to see. All right, so we use a pencil. We're going to need a razor blade to cut the tape. So one razor blade, you might have a couple just in case. Next thing is something to measure with. All right, so a ruler is fine, tape measure is fine, or a cloth, flexible, which we use a lot in class. So we'll probably use this. So we'll use the flexible cloth one, but any of them are fine. All right, last thing we need is some tape, and this is fine line tape. So this is the vinyl tape that we use for getting a clean edge on our paint jobs. So we have two different sizes for this project. Okay, these are brand new. So these are our two sizes. So this is 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch. All right, so these are the two different sizes that we're going to be using on this panel. And don't worry about the color of them. You're going to see some green ones, orange. The old school is blue. The even older one is like a light pale green. So don't worry about the color. As long as it's a vinyl type of fine line, you'll end up with a nice edge. Okay, so we're ready to start getting measuring here. So we'll put these aside, razor blade aside. All right, so here's our panel. And what I would like to do is, if it's been sitting around a while, give it a little cleaning, right? So grab a paper towel. If it's really dirty and it's been sitting around a while, you can use some grease and wax remover and a paper towel. However, you want to make sure this is completely dry before you start masking. Otherwise, the glue gets stuck to your panel and it's a mess to get off. So if you use this, which is fine, just make sure that you get it dried off completely before you start masking. I'm just going to use a little bit of water. Just dampen up a paper towel just to get the dust off. And then you want to make sure that it dries completely. So you can see the color comes back, you can see the flake again, but a lot of dust came off of that, so it's a good thing we cleaned it. All right, so I'm going to let that dry for a minute, and then we'll start laying out our dimensions. All right, now that it's dry, first thing I want to do is I want to measure the panel. Now we know it should be 20 inches across, so this is 20 inches by 24. Okay, so 20 by 24, and we need to split that in half. We need to lay out some little guidelines first. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to come to the ends and I'm going to split the 20 in half, and I'm going to mark it at 10. So a little bit of a pencil mark. Don't dig in, just a light little mark. You don't need much. All right, so I'm going to mark that at 10. And then I'm going to go the opposite way, and we're going to split this in half. So at 24, we're going to find the center, which is 12. We're going to mark it. 24, mark it at 12. Okay. Now we have our center marks going in two directions. All right. So next thing I want to do, we start laying out some tape. So we're going to take the 1/4 inch, which is the larger of the two. Okay, so 1/4 inch. This is a brand new roll, so find the end. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to connect side to side, going in each direction. Okay. Now a lot of people will just kind of lay it down and start masking, right? But it ends up with a crooked line. So the way to get a nice straight line is we're looking for our first mark over here. So I want to line up the tape with that mark, and I'm just tacking it right on the end, just so it holds, right? So I can move my tape around. So it's right on the edge. It's over the mark. So there's my mark right here. So I'm laying it over, and I'm looking over here to this mark, okay? Hopefully it's in the shot. And all I'm doing is laying it straight down, come straight down until it lands over that mark right there. Okay, so that'll be a nice even straight line. So tack it on each ends and then lightly press it down in the middle, right? Lightly press it down, and then you're just going to tear it off on the end. Okay, so now we have a straight line dividing our panel in that direction. All right, I want to do the same thing going in the opposite direction. So find my mark, drop it down, and again, it's loose, it's free to drop down, and I just want to come straight down until I cover my mark on this end. Okay, make sure it's tacked down on each end and then lightly press it down. Once you lightly press it down, that'll stick it to the metal, and then you can come back and push it a little bit harder just to make sure it's secured down there. All right, but you want to lightly press it down first, otherwise it'll start moving around in a wobbly line, which we don't want. All right, so now we got this divided up. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to come in from the edge. So from each edge, I want to come in and measure out 4 inches from the edge. Okay, so again, I'm taking my cloth tape here, laying the edge right on the edge, come in, and on the tape, mark it at 4. Okay, same thing over here, mark it at the edge. So leave that right on the edge, and come in at just a little mark at 4. All right, so you're going to do that to all 4. And a quick mark. All right, so now we have a 4-inch from the edge mark on each of our division lines. Again, we're taking the 1/4-inch tape. And now I just want to connect these dots to form a diamond. All right, so same deal. Cover up that mark. Same thing. Bring it up. It's loose. Bring it up and put it right over that other mark. Push it down. Same thing. And the order doesn't matter. And if you get a crooked line, it didn't go down right. Okay, what happens if it didn't go down right? Maybe a little off from your marks or whatever. You can peel it up and restick it. You can do this multiple times. As long as you're not touching the sticky side of the tape and there's not a lot of grease from your hands on the panel, you can reposition this a lot of times. All right, so again, if I didn't like it, maybe it missed the mark or it was a little bit wavy, we can reposition. All right, I can still see my mark under the tape. So again, lay it down there. And really what I'm also trying to do over here is kind of center it so that where the tape crosses over is in the center of this division line, right? So we have kind of a even intersection. So again, I'm finding the mark, lay it down. All right. Make sure they're all pressed down. If you don't press them down, what happens is the tape wants to shrink a little bit and they'll end up popping off and getting detached from the metal. All right, so you can kind of see where we're going with this. All right, so you can see a diamond forming in the middle. Next thing I want to do is just take a razor blade. This is a brand new one, so unwrap it. Be careful with it. Extremely sharp, right? And I want to start cutting off the little tails, right? The little extra stuff on this, right? So what I do is, one of the things we want to avoid is cutting into the paint. I don't want to cut into the paint if I can avoid it. So one of the tricks to this is only pressing hard enough to cut through the tape and not much more. As you're learning, of course, you're going to end up getting into the paint a little bit, but it's something to try to practice for, so you don't go too deep. Because you know, this is a panel, but let's say we're doing this on a car. Obviously, you wouldn't want to cut up the car, the paint job. So be careful. And what I do is just with the razor blade, and I'm going to start cutting the ends. So wherever it overlaps here, so there's an overlap right here, and I'm just going to put my razor blade in the middle of the tape right there, so it's even on both sides. And I'm just going to take the tail and I'm just going to lift straight up. Okay, so I'm not pushing down with the razor blade or anything. I'm just setting it on the panel and lifting up with the tape I want to peel off. All right, so lift up, and I'm just doing the one that's on top right here. So these are sitting on top of the tape, so those are easy to pull off. All right, and you'll end up with a bunch of little pieces of tape. So throw those away. Now the other ones that are on the bottom here, I want to put the razor blade in line with my edge that I want to cut. So I just want to lay the razor blade so it continues the line. All right, so I just want to lay it on the edge of the tape, and same thing, just lift up, and it cuts it off. All right, so I'm just laying it on the edge. Grab that little piece. Make sure it's in the right spot before you rip it. All right, so I'm just setting it there on the edges. Let it cut. All right, so already it's looking better. Let's get rid. I like to get rid of some of the little pieces. All right, the next thing I want to do is we want to get rid of this little cross that's in the middle. So this little plus sign right here, so that we'll be left with the diamond and these outer lines right here. So this is where you got to be careful, because you are going to cut through the tape, and there's nothing to stop you from cutting into the paint. So you got to be very careful and kind of feel how deep it's cutting. All right, so I want to cut that little corner out carefully. You might have to grab it with the edge of your razor blade carefully. Okay, so it starts peeling it out. Same thing over here. So very carefully. Okay. Now it's starting to look like something. All right, next thing I want to do, so I want to make some marks around the outside perimeter, because we want to make a little border that's going around here. So I'm going to take my tape again. I'm going to mark it 1 inch from the edge. So what I want to do is come to each corner, and I'm going to mark 1 inch. All right, so I've got 2 lines here. Same thing all the way around. So make in each corner, mark it at 1 inch. Get a better tape. I can't hardly see the lines. Right. And you can see I'm starting, if you know, at the 2. I'm still only measuring 1 inch, but I'm getting rid of that first part because the numbers are kind of worn off and it's hard to tell where my marks are. So you can what they call a burn. You can burn 1 inch or 2, and then start somewhere else. Just remember that if you started on 2, you're only doing 1 inch, right? All right. So I've got some marks again with the 1/4 inch, and doing the same exact thing. We'll do it right on top of these marks. Same thing, mark it, you know, leave it, same thing. Just kind of tack it down. And with this tape, try not to stretch it. It is stretchy, it's vinyl tape, but if you try stretching it too far and you let it sit overnight or something like that, or too long, it'll start contracting and it'll peel up because it wants to go back to the original shape. So if you stretched it out too far, it wants to come back and it'll start peeling off your panel. So try not to stretch it as you're doing any of these. Just kind of let it do its thing. All right. So now we got a perimeter. Make sure you push it down. So that's 1 inch. So 1 inch from the edge is where we marked it. I want to come back and I want to do the same thing to the corners. I want to clean them off. And the other thing we're doing is these little tails right here. We want to take these off. Right? We want to take these little spots off here as well. All right, so there's where we're at. We got our basic outline, so we want to go back and make sure everything's pushed down. All right, push everything down, and especially one of the places where you really want to pay attention to is where it overlaps onto other ones. You want to make sure that you push it down so there's no way that paint is going to get underneath the tape. All right, so we're done with, for the moment, with the 1/4 inch. I'm going to switch over to the 1/8 inch. And basically what we're going to do is put an 1/8 inch line inside of each one of these 5 segments, okay? And that's going to be with the 1/8 inch. Right? So what I want to do, there's a couple different ways you can do this, but basically what I'm looking for is it to be next to the thicker line, okay? And one of the tricks I tell people, you can just eyeball it. I'll usually eyeball it to get the gap that I want, right? So whatever looks pleasant, right? It's got to look fairly even. The gap you want even. Sometimes it's kind of hard to for beginners to do that. So one of the things I recommend is taking some of the tape and using it as a guide. So I'm just going to take the 1/8 inch tape, right? And I'm just going to put a couple small pieces. Okay, so I just put a couple small pieces as spacers. And what I'm going to do now is take this and I'm going to set it right next to the spacer and right next to the spacer here. Right, doing the same thing, I want to tack it down. I'm just going to bring it down until it's right next to that other one. Right, and then I'm going to pull out my spacer. And you can save these little spacers, you can reuse them a few times. And there you have a perfect 1/8 inch gap for your division right there. Right, so I can keep going around with that. So I'm just going to lay this down as my spacer right there. Lay this one down right here as my spacer. And do the exact same thing. So I want to bring it and I want to put this tape right next to it. Stretch it across. Don't stretch it too much, of course. And set it right down next to your other spacer right there. Right, pick up your other spacer. And continue on. So you have some nice gaps. They're nice and even all the way around. Okay, so let me do the rest of these the same method. So you so it's starting to take shape. So that's our center one is done. Next thing I want to do is these 4 corners. Same exact thing. All right, same process. I'm going to do it without any spacers, so it's a little bit quicker. Now, without spacers, of course, there's no guarantee that it's going to be perfect, right? But it's a good opportunity to practice training your eye with spacing. Because obviously, if you have a lot of taping to do, you're not going to do the little spacers all the time because it is time consuming. And one thing you can do is you can stretch this all the way across, like on these long runs. I can bring this all the way across and start working on my other quadrant. Okay. Now we just keep on going. And when I'm spacing it, I'm looking at the spacing that's next to it, so they look somewhat the same. May not be perfect, especially if you're eyeballing it, but you don't want it to stand out as a mistake. nothing's going to peel up on you. Make sure all the intersections are pushed down, so you want to kind of eliminate any gaps where paint is going to get through. And then we're ready to go. All right, so this is what your first panel is going to look like, and we're going to take it to school. And next thing is we're going to start masking to cover up everything but the section we're going to do a design in. So each section will get its own masking to isolate it, and each one will have a separate design. All right, so we'll take it to school, show you how to mask it off, and then I'll show you how to make templates for some of the designs, and then I'll show you how I do the designs. All right, so next up we'll be at school doing designs. So I'll see you then.